Expecting a few more people, but time to start, Jimmy. All right.
All right. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jimmy Williams. I am an instructional technology specialist over at the FITC. What I did before that was I was an adaptive technology specialist at the University of Mississippi. Basically, what we're going to talk about today is the accessible course content having to do with PDFs, Word documents, and PowerPoints. Most people have this idea that accessibility is this terrible thing that's going to take you an enormous amount of time, and that definitely not looking forward to doing it. Well, that's not really the case. Some things can be cumbersome, but to get things accessible in a format where individuals can have them read to them or access them is not as difficult as you think, and we're going to go over that today. Does everybody have a handout? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes and move forward. If at any point you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd rather have questions than just for me to sit up here and just spit out information. All right, so what we're going to do, I know on the handout we have PDFs first, but we're going to save that for last, and we'll go ahead and jump into PowerPoint presentations first. Because PDFs can be made accessible and much more in depth than a PowerPoint or a Word document. Okay. Now, keep in mind that in its presentation mode, PowerPoint is not accessible at all. It just looks at it as a picture, and that's not the way that your students with any kind of disability are going to actually access them. They're going to go through the edit mode. Now here, say that this is just a normal PowerPoint slide. You see the number 1 here, a picture, text up here, text. The text is accessible. Anytime that you can put your cursor inside and you can see it, it's going to be accessible and be able to be read by a screen reader. This, even though it says number 1, is a graphic. And let's go to sorry, forgot for a second. All right. In order to make something or to add an alt tag to anything, you're going to have to right-click on whatever graphic it is and go to Format Picture here at the bottom. When you do that, this option here, Size and Properties, will allow you to add it. You can go to Alt Text right here. And you can see that the number 1 actually has a title of the number 1. And its description is just number 1. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular, especially for something that simple, but just something that's labeled, because somebody that's trying to access this through a screen reader will not see that at all other than it is a figure with no alt text. Here, this picture I've titled it as How to Access the Plugin in PowerPoint for Camtasia. And then it goes into a more in-depth description about what I'm actually seeing here. It's not just that it's a graphic. I'm actually saying, okay, here's what the graphic is, here's what it's depicting, and so on and so forth. Here, this text is accessible. I can put the cursor in it. This too is not, and this graphic is not. The point being that you can add an alt text to anything that needs, any kind of graphic or any kind of picture that you bring in needs to have an alt text given to it. All right. Now, something that I think is completely underrated is the notes section. Some teachers don't like to use notes because they're going to give that out in class. But for an individual that has any kind of disability, chances are they're going to be accessing this outside of class more than somebody that wouldn't be. So anything that you think is just going to add to that, just throw it in the notes. It just takes a second to write down what's in your head anyways. And to throw it down and let somebody actually see it outside of class is going to help them understand better, especially if there's anything else that you think that they should get from that slide, just add it. It doesn't take very long. Now what I'm going to do is show you this next slide and show you how to actually add the different things. I showed you in the previous slide just the end result of it, but it's pretty simple. So this text right here is accessible. This graphic above it is not. So the way that we're going to do that, again, and just to reiterate, because this doing accessibility, It's more on doing it repetitively, because it's the same thing. If you only do something once every 3 or 4 months, you're going to forget it, and then it's going to be contacting somebody or going to a colleague and asking, do you remember how to do this? I remember they went over it in a workshop, but I don't remember. So we're going to go over this one more time. So we're going to select the graphic. Once you select it, you right-click and go to Format Picture, because this on the side isn't normally going to be there, which is why it took me a second to remember how I got there. So we're going to select that graphic, right-click, Format Picture. We're going to choose Size and Properties, and then go to Alt Text. This is just a toolbar. So all I'm going to do is just write toolbar. The description just has, what do you see there? What's important about that specific graphic that needs to be relayed to the student? Indeed. Now in this particular thing, in Camtasia, the reason that has to be highlighted is if you don't select a device, it's not going to allow you to record. So here, that microphone is highlighted. So you want to tell them that on the toolbar, on the record toolbar specifically, that the microphone is highlighted, meaning that that's going to be.
Where's the highlighted microphone?
Right here. Oh, that box. I know it's small, but I've used Camtasia quite a bit, actually, with faculty members here recently, because they want to do a voice over on top of their PowerPoint presentations and then upload them. They cease to be PowerPoint presentations at that point and turn into MP4s, which translate to any device that you have. And it's nice because you actually have complete control over it when you're doing it. So anytime that you click the button, it moves to the next slide, and you can continue to talk. And then you can pause it and then continue if you want to gather your thoughts before you go to the next slide. It's really nice. If you guys are interested, give us a call over at the FITC, and we'll set up an appointment for you guys to come over and check it out and see if it's something you want to do. We do have a room set aside, actually, where people can go in and record so that you don't have to worry about noise coming from me or Brenda talking on the phone, or the phone ringing, or just somebody kind of looking over your shoulder, what are you doing? It's a nice little room that's set aside. I'm sorry?
Where?
Over at the telecom building, the FITC, room 214, second floor. Yes, ma'am.
Since you're on that topic,
Yes.
I've created those for my class, so how are those accessible? So now that I have these MP4s in my online class, can all students, regardless of a disability, access the
No.
information? No, right?
Transcripts.
So now I have the opposite problem, right? I got to go back.
Yes,
Yeah.
for
so
transcripts.
I got to undo that part.
Oh.
Slides with alt tags and the transcript for the language, right?
Yes, you'd have to write a transcript for it. But now with, let's see, Dragon can do it. There are other programs out there that can grab text as you're going, and then you can just put that in on top of it.
And then the slides themselves, I need to provide this kind of information for separately as well, correct? Because now the slides are packed part of the MP4, right? So now it's just this package.
In that sense, what I would do is not only would I give them, give the students access to that MP4, I would also include the PowerPoint.
Yeah, okay.
Because that way then you're kind of taking care of both things.
Okay.
I mean, it is nice to be able to hear your instructor going over things, and worst case scenario, they can have the movie playing on one side of the screen or even underneath the PowerPoint while it's going and following along with it.
Yeah, so do both.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
If you want to go that route. If you do want to have your voice commentary, or you actually giving your lecture on top of the PowerPoint presentation, then I would do both.
Yeah, I mean, I've already created them. So, I mean, I've already gone down the path of having the MP4s.
Right.
But now I'm trying to backtrack so that they're accessible that way.
Fair enough.
Okay, that's great.
All right. So does everybody understand how to actually tag any kind of documents, or I'm sorry, any kind of graphics or pictures? Any questions with that? I told you it's not that difficult with this. Sometimes it can be kind of time-consuming depending on how many pictures you have. Now, just a few more thoughts on PowerPoints. Number one, keep in mind that it's not just individuals that are blind or deaf that are going to be accessing this. There's a whole range in between there. So you have individuals that have low sight, for example, or individuals that if you have a complete solid background, some of the text washes out because they can't see, their eyes can't focus on it. So my advice is to keep high contrast, whether it be white background, black text. But to be perfectly honest, and this is not going to happen, so I don't expect you to, but the best contrast is going to be a black background with either yellow text or white text. Yellow is going to be the best. Just something to keep in mind. I don't expect everyone to start turning out black backgrounded PowerPoints. All right. Now, as far as PowerPoint's concerned, that's pretty much it when it comes to accessibility. You want to make sure that the alt tags are there, that whatever text you have in there is automatically going to be accessible. And any notes that you have pertaining to a certain slide, any extra ideas that you want them to get from that, to make sure it's there. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to Word documents. Word documents in and of themselves are inherently accessible. The text is accessible. You can put the cursor in it, and you can see it, as long as it's not coming up in a viewer. The only problem that I've found with D2L is that any PDF or Word document comes up in a viewer. That viewer is not accessible. That being said, because you uploaded it to D2L, it is able to be downloaded by the students. That is accessible. So as long as they have access to the original file, then they have no excuse for not being able to access it. So where the accessibility comes, I'm sorry.
Like students who have these need to know that any file that's uploaded to D2L is downloadable, so they should know that they can access it.
They should,
Okay.
but not necessarily.
Okay.
Whenever, and I'm sure that you guys know this, whenever you rely on someone to know something,
Yeah.
it doesn't always work out that way. So if it comes up in class, well, I can't see this, point it out.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Now, the accessibility with Word actually comes in the formatting, because you have all of these different heading levels that you can use. You have the different bolding and underlining and that kind of thing to draw attention to the things that you want to draw attention to. Keep in mind that the high contrast definitely applies here as well. So this up here, see how this is a lighter blue than this bold? This is not going to be as easily seen by an individual because, for one, that white background, it might wash that blue out for someone. So normally what I would do is, if I were making this completely accessible, is I would bold that and underline it. Italicizing doesn't really matter one way or another, really. But just make sure that anything that's important is able to be seen. Now, the reason why I chose this one, go ahead, sir.
So if you got somebody who's blind, they're not going to see bold, and they're not going to see underline.
Actually, what will happen is an individual using JAWS, and usually that is used by someone that is completely blind. If something is bolded, it has a different connotation. So it will actually, Bill, is it right? I think it will actually say each. No, that's only capitalized words. I think it will actually read it, but I think it will say specifically that it is bold.
Okay, knows that.
Yes, if you capitalize every word, every letter in there, it will actually read each letter rather than the entire word.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why it does that, but I'm sure that they have their reasons. All right. Now, the reason I use this Word document is to show, over here on the left, you can see the different heading styles, or the heading levels, rather. This top, accessible content, is a heading level 1. Now, the reason why heading levels are important in accessibility is it helps with navigation. It's not just that everything looks all nice and pretty and that it's easy for us to look at and tell what is what. If you had a document, say that this was 700 pages, and rather than actually going down, and we, being sighted, can look at it and say, okay, well, I don't want to look at PDFs. I want to look at something else. You can scroll down and just check the next tag to see if that's something you want to do without actually having to read the content that's associated with each different tag. It's the same thing with an individual that uses a screen reader. They navigate via the headings. So the different heading levels, yes, sir?
How are the headings? Are they automatically created?
They are not, and I'll show you how to do that right now. If you look here at the top, you have heading level 1, 2, all the way up to 5.
Oh,
Now, the reason that chances are you're never going to need 5 heading levels. That being said, you may run in a situation where you feel it's necessary. Completely up to you how far you want to go with it. And to be perfectly honest, if you're going to go back and retrofit any of these Word documents, it's easy just to run through real quick. Make sure that the title of the paper or the page or the content is a heading level 1, and any sub topics, just label them however you think that they should be labeled, as far as heading level 2, 3, whatever is most important. What I normally would tell people that were working on this, and I'll show you in the PDF rather than this because this is something I put together for this class. I think it's just easier to see the way that things are set up here on the left side with heading level 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. But if you set everything up like this, it's going to be easier for students to actually navigate through it. On a document that is this size, not really going to make much difference. But if you have something that is large, sometimes if you don't have this, it's a nightmare for someone to have to read through. Because if you think about it in the terms of DVDs, or actually better, VCR tapes, if you know exactly, if you've seen a movie before and you get to a certain point, like, okay, well, I need to go back a little bit. What if you've never seen that movie and you're trying to get to a certain point? You have no idea where to go. So if you go forward, you may be further that you need to go, or it may need that, or maybe that you need to go backwards. So being able to go through these headings saves a lot of time. Okay, now we're going to add a picture to this. And what's great about Microsoft, I know a lot of people can say things that aren't so great about Microsoft. I myself, I like them. They work well for the most part. At certain times, they're a nightmare. But for the most part, when it comes to accessibility, they've come a long way from where they used to be. So we're just going to add a picture, just a random place here. Go up to Insert, Picture. I like the koala. So same thing as when that we're going to do the same thing here that we did in the PowerPoint. We are going to right-click, Format Picture, Layout and Properties, Alt Text. That's it. So if you keep in mind that Word documents are inherently accessible as far as the text is concerned, and to be perfectly honest, accessibility, 90% of the problem is the text is not accessible. That's 90% of your problem. So if using a Word document, you can go in and actually go the whole 9 yards. You have heading levels, you have all your pictures tagged. You can't get any better with that than a Word document, or in a Word document. Sir?
Is this the most recent, I'm presuming it is the most recent
Yes, sir.
Word, and so if you don't have the most recent version, probably upgrade.
There's still accessibility built into it. To be honest, I think that each one changes. I know that 2007 had accessibility. It didn't have the same layout as this, but you could still add alt tags by right-clicking.
Okay, I'm just figuring out that, yeah, I really need to have the most recent one, and I'll get the computer that has it.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
So explain to me then how the reader works through the headings, so you can skip from heading 1 to another heading 1 to
Yes,
another
ma'am.
heading 1 to another heading 1.
Now, keep in mind, and when I say this, I'm so not kidding. JAWS has thousands of hotkey combinations. I'm dead serious.
Okay.
Now, I was familiar with JAWS in my previous job. I would show individuals how to use it. But the fine aspects of things, I couldn't even begin to tell you that I understood all of it. But yes, you can actually navigate via different heading levels, either it be, or whether it be a heading level 1, 2, 3. It's the same thing with the internet. JAWS, it's not just a text reader. JAWS is a program that is very robust. It's a resource hog, first off. But that being said, it can navigate your entire computer. So whenever you turn the computer on, JAWS would come on. You can navigate the icons on your desktop. You can navigate web pages. You can go within frames. And a lot of the problem when it comes to accessibility for HTML is just that some people would build so many different frames within a website that it was very difficult to navigate through to get to the main content page. That has been changing as of late, and that's almost gone away completely. But the navigation is very easy for the most part with JAWS, just using the down, side, or tab buttons. Everything can be customized, obviously, to do whatever the individual needs, but needless to say that I am no expert in JAWS. I tried, I really did. It was so robust, and Bill,
I want to understand how the levels work.
yes,
So using all 5 is useful.
it is.
Yeah. If they can jump from one to the other at that level.
Yes, if you have content that really necessitates you actually using 5, then yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So, adding pictures in Word documents. Everybody clear? Any other questions pertaining to either PowerPoint or Word? All right. So, the thing is when it comes to accessibility with these programs, it's really, there's not that much to know, but if you don't know it, then obviously you can't do it, and it seems like this huge problem when somebody says, make your stuff accessible. I don't know what to do exactly. So it's just taking the time to learn it, and on behalf of MTSU, I should have said this at the beginning, on the behalf of MTSU and your students, thank you all for being here. All right, so let's go ahead and work on PDFs. This is going to be the most time consuming, which is why I wanted to leave it to the beginning, or to the end, I'm sorry. This is a sample PDF that basically, and I know you've all seen them, that someone put on a scanner. This actually is a very good copy. Now here are a few tips that are actually necessities when it comes to scanning documents like this. Number 1, never, ever, ever just put a document or a book on a scanner, close the lid, and hit scan. It's not going to do anything as far as accessibility is concerned. You might get the content out there to individuals that have no sight issues. And here's why. When you put a book in a scanner and you just set it down like this and walk away, gently set the top on, I know that's probably best for the scanner. What happens, and I'm sure that you guys have seen this before, number 1, the black line that's here in the center is much more exaggerated to the point where it actually comes out and starts to touch the text on either side. The text begins to wrap. So even if you were to run the optical character recognition software, which will go in and make the text that is there renderable, it still will not pick up that text. It may look like it does, but when you go back and try to select it to verify, it's not there. So you have 2 options at that point. A, you can create a figure and literally write word for word the entire page. Or you can just take something on the front end and actually put it on the scanner, push it down, and scan. There are also other options. You can have the bindings cut off of the book. I know that's terrifying. Stay with me. You can have the bindings cut off of the book, scan it in, and then have them rebound. It will not be the same binding that was on the book originally. It will be a spiral type notebook. And personally, when I did this for Ole Miss, the students like that more. Now granted, you won't be using that for students, but I know that they like the fact that they could actually open it up and have it sitting like this rather than having to hold it like this. They could actually just hold it like this and access the material. Now granted, I actually gave them a digital copy, which is why I had to cut the binding to begin with. But they like the fact that it can be turned around, and also they were able to sell it back to our bookstore as well, just like that. Okay? So, yes ma'am.
I mean, in terms of, maybe future purchasing technology, they have like specialized book scanners, like historians love these things, but like they're kind of like this almost like cradle that you can hold the book in, and that's like an overhead scanner. So I don't know if like the senior was thinking about purchasing something like that, because that would be a huge help.
That's a good question. I probably wouldn't be the best person
and
to answer that.
if your office has
Bill,
it.
please.
Oh, you have one?
We have one too.
Really?
Yeah, in the College of Ed. It's a book I have.
Awesome.
Yay.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, I'll go over there.
It's just simple.
Yeah, because they're really great to use because you get rid of this problem because it kind of just cradles the book on the binder.
Now, I have seen them before, and actually when I was actually leaving Ole Miss, I was trying to convince them that they needed to buy one because the process there was to actually cut the binding off for me to scan each page in a Fujitsu scanner that would scan both front and back, and then take it and make it accessible by doing all the stuff I'm about to show you. So it was time consuming, to say the least,
I
but
didn't catch what the machine was.
It's a book scanner. So rather than being like a flat scanner, it's like the base of it is actually this kind of like cradle where you kind of have the sleeves you can hold the book in, and the scanner's on top, and then you can position with the cradle book page.
Binding on.
You can leave the binding on, you don't have to bust the binding by smashing it so flat. So especially if you have a book that you care a lot for, you might not want to smash it in a
I like it.
So, but they're going to the college ed apparently. Yeah. What's your department?
The Adaptive Technology
Oh,
Center.
good. So,
Yes.
now I know where to go.
okay, so let's just take this for what it is. Say that you actually took this and scanned it on a scanner. Like I said, this was actually a really good copy. The black line is not so much there. And when I say put some pressure on, I'm not talking about jumping off the top
Oh,
rope
sure,
or
of
something.
course.
I'm just saying just gently apply some pressure and keep as much light in that scan as possible. That will do two things. Number one, it will take away that black line. Two, the more light that's in it, the clearer the picture is going to be. All right, so it is important to do that, and I'll show you why in just a second. So say that you've just scanned this document, and we've got all of these different pages here, mostly uniform. So we are now going to run the optical character recognition software on it. First thing you do is go up to Tools and go down to Text Recognition. And this goes back to what I was telling you earlier about doing multiple files. Say that you had 100 files on your computer that you were going to need to do this with. You can run the text recognition in multiple files where you can select as many as you'd like. Now there's still more work to be done on top of that, but at least it will get this out of the way and you can do it in one step rather than 100 different steps trying to do each one. So we're going to go ahead and do the text recognition in this file. Now, there should be some music playing in the background. Any questions while this runs? It won't take long. Yes, ma'am.
You have to have the Adobe Acrobat Pro to
Yes,
do
ma'am.
this. You can't just have the reader.
No, ma'am. When it comes to accessibility, you have to have the Acrobat if you're going to be working with PDFs. Word documents, obviously, you won't need it. But when you're doing PDFs, you have to have Acrobat.
So do we have a license for that we can access that, or is that?
It's not a free thing. I think it's through the department, but I know that when I had it installed on my computer when I first got here, it was $75, I think.
Or
I'm told they're trying to make it.
Adobe Acrobat. Bill, go ahead.
I think we do now have a cell license for it.
We do.
Yeah, because I got one disc that was serial number, paid for it, and then the next time I asked for it, it was just site license.
Same one? Okay.
So
Yes, ma'am.
And then do you have to go through this process for, say, like PDFs you create from, I mean, possibly Word, but like I use LaTeX a lot to write documents, and so PDF is the most accessible form after that. So you have to do this text recognition for PDFs created that way too, or?
I know that whenever you save something from a Word document, I've not used the program you talked about, but I know when you save it from a Word document, the text is accessible, but a lot of the other accessibility that you may have built into a Word document will not translate.
Okay.
Also, the formatting is gone, so it looks nothing like your original document.
Okay.
What was the program that you mentioned?
LaTeX?
LaTeX?
Yeah, so it's a word processing software that
Okay.
you encode you basically write your document as a code, and then it goes to the processor and generates your.
Okay. I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, but I was just thinking like if you had generated your own PDF, you have to go through this process.
Okay. All right. One more thing I'd like to add before I continue. Word documents, PowerPoints, PDFs, they're all great. HTML is forever accessible. You can build so much into an HTML document, but it will always be accessible. So if it's possible for you to create an HTML document, which you can in D2L just by going to create, go into content and go to new, and just write whatever Word document or whatever kind of text editor that you want. Now keep in mind it does not have the same functionality as Word, but it is just a simple text editor. Okay? All right, so let's go back to this. The scan has been completed, and before, where the entire document would turn blue whenever I clicked in it, now you can actually put the cursor in. Yes, sir.
I'm missing something about the HTML thing.
Yes, sir.
You know, in Word we can save them as an HTML.
Yes, you can.
So what am I getting by, it sounds like I get something by, in terms of accessibility by going to HTML. What am I getting on top of what I was
Well, when it
getting
comes
in
to
Word?
Word, it's just going to, if you save it as an HTML document, all of the heading levels will translate over, just bracket H1 or H2, however you want to do it. So when it comes to that, not really that much. It's just any alt tags or anything that you save in there will translate over as well. But it's just the same thing as a Word document. The only thing that I would say in that situation is that if an individual didn't have Word, they'd be able to still access it through HTML.
It's the browser.
Yes. But for the most part, pretty much every college student has Microsoft Suite. So, all right. So now originally when we first started on this document, on this part, when I clicked inside the document, the whole thing would turn blue. Now you can see after the optical character recognition software has been run that you can actually put that in there. And that's the same all the way down. So at this point the text is renderable, but it will just read things. Now what I always suggest is to go ahead and run the auto tag feature. And something else I want to point out that I didn't include in the handout, anyone that has Acrobat or wants to use Acrobat to make things accessible, while we're here right now, I can show you how to find everything. And there's a roundabout way of getting to all the accessibility functions in here. But I'm going to show you the easiest way to actually add them to your toolbar where you won't ever have to worry about it again. If you right-click on your toolbar up here and go to Edit Current Toolset, go to Accessibility, and you can see that it has the full check, the accessibility report, add tags to documents, touch-up reading order. The only ones that I really use here are the add tags to documents, touch-up reading order, and the accessibility full check. Those are the three that you're going to use the most. The others, the text recognition, the OCR, is going to be saved in the toolbar exactly where it is now. It's just as easy to reach as it is here. So we can go ahead and leave that there. If you wanted to add it to your toolbar, you can just by going here and adding it. So let's go back, and we're going to go ahead and add tags to the document. Now what this does is it gives Adobe's best guess as to what or how the content is set up, whether it's a picture or a table or a paragraph or text or whatever the case is. It's going to give its best guess. So we're going to go ahead and run this. Something else I like about this is it gives you an idea of what's going on. On the left-hand side, it will show you where some problems are. Now, when you look at it, it's like, that's a lot of problems to have. But the truth of the matter is we're going to go ahead and scroll down. Actually, I'm sorry. The touch-up reading order button here at the top, and this saved me so much time. Go ahead and close that. This will actually show you how everything is set up. I'm going to go ahead and close that as well. All right. So some of the accessibility things that were popping up, like it didn't have, a figure didn't have alt text. Well, here you can see that there is a figure here on the left notated by a number 4. And what that is, if we turn this off, that's just that little recyclable. You can add a tag to that if you like, or you can take it out. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's go back, click on that. If in order to select anything, to actually augment any of these fields, you actually have to select the number associated with it. You can't just click in the box and expect for it to do what it needs to do. So we're going to select that number 4. And actually, you know what, on this one I'm going to write an alt tag just to show you how to do it. So once that number 4 is selected, and you can see that it's not the number 5 that's selected because it comes up as blue or gray associated, depending on whether or not it's selected. Everybody see that? Okay. So we're going to right click on that number 4, and we're going to go to Edit Alternate Text. From there, you can just name this whatever you want. All right, so I'm just going to say test for the time being. And you can see now that that figure actually has something associated with it. So if you were to close this, you won't see that. but someone with a screen reader would. They'd be able to read that. Now, the only bad thing about this is if you do have a lot of figures in your document, it will read figure such and such every single time that it gets to a figure. Now, to me, having worked on them, it was cumbersome. But could you imagine having to read a paper that every time there was a picture, it said figure such and such, and then it would go on with a description about what that is? And if you think about it in terms of, and this is actually interesting, JAWS users, the people that use this on a daily basis, if you were to sit next to one of them while they were working on it, you would have no idea what was going on with their computer. They listen to things so fast that even, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, some users, they have things going so fast, they're not actually hearing everything word for word. It's almost how we would do a cursory glance at something. We're looking for something specific. They're listening for something specific. So when they hear that, they'll back up and find where they needed to be. But it is speaking so fast that unless you actually have trained yourself to do that, you'd have no idea what was going on. The first time I ever heard it, I was like, I think there's something wrong with your computer. Because it made no sense to me at all. I couldn't understand what they were saying, and actually the woman laughed at me. She goes, oh, no, it's all right. I know what I'm doing. All right, so let's go back in. Here, and see, this is the problem, and this is why I said it does its best guess as to what the content is. If you look here, we're going to go ahead and delete that out so you can see what it is. They listed this as a table. Well, it's not a table. So we're going to select it, call it text, and it just made it part of that. This up here was something that was written in that particular thing. While it's selected as text, it does not know what that is at all. So we're going to go ahead and delete that out. So anything that is written, it's not going to recognize as text. It has to be something that was typed in, something that has a uniform look to it, because it's just not going to understand it. All right. So here you can see that everything is kind of set up correctly. And something that I always encourage people to do, and it's just one more step, you can do it or you don't have to, it's up to you, but as far as accessibility is concerned, it's nice to have, is you can select that text, and you see how each word has a separate box. That shows, and depending on the quality of the scan, you can actually see there would be certain words in there that wouldn't be there. You'd see the word, but there wouldn't be a block around it, which means that the PDF doesn't see it and screen readers won't see it either. So there will be skips. And that goes back to what I was saying before. If the scan quality itself is bad, if the text is wrapped, even though that you run the optical character recognition software and then you do the auto tag so you can see all of this, when you actually select that text, the text towards the edges that have wrapped do not show up. So it causes a lot of problems. Either you can go back in and rewrite the entire thing by hand, or you can try to get a better scan, which is my vote. So here, I'm actually going to go ahead and do this page. So this is chapter 5. So I want to label that as a heading 1. And then 3 here, I'm going to name that heading 2. We'll go ahead and leave that as text. And then 5 is text. Now you'll notice that on this page, because this is one page, even though we can tell by looking at it that it's 2 pages, but in actuality, as far as the digital form is concerned, it's 1 page. So you can see here on the left-hand side, you have a number 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the reading order. That's how screen readers will read this. So basically, what it is that it will read this left-hand side first, and then go over to number 2 after that's finished, and go ahead and read down. Now, depending on actually several factors, but I used to go in and select the page numbers and add a heading level 1 to it for a couple of reasons. Number 1, individuals that use JAWS, they can't go back up and check to see what page they're on. So it's kind of that needle in the dark, hoping that you understand or that recognize some of the content to know where you are. So the way that you select things that aren't already selected, just grab it like that, heading level 1, And now that's moved up to number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can actually select this number 3 or 93 down here as well and label that heading level 1. And the reason why I label it heading level 1 is it will actually show up in the order panel. So they can actually tell what page they're on. Now, being that this is a 93, and I don't want that to be the last thing on the page that's read. I want that to be the first thing on the page that's read. I'm going to move this up. And the way you do that is to just grab it. Click on it and drag it up. Now, because the page on the previous page actually was 1 and 2, I want that to be read first. So now that's 3, which is going to be read first, then 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah?
This is great.
But it allows you to actually control how the content is delivered. If, for example, you had a figure that was in the middle of a page, you had a picture that was in the middle of the page that was associated with, say, either the top or the bottom paragraph, you can have it to where that figure is set in between the paragraphs, at the beginning of a paragraph, at the end of a paragraph, but it would then be associated with it. Because most of the time, whenever you have something like that, it goes through all the text and then we'll label the stuff on the sides. If you want it to be associated with a certain paragraph, you can label it like that. Any questions? Sir?
If you simply wanted to present chapter 5,
Yes, sir.
and this to the facing paper, delete those.
Yes, you could. Yes. Actually, what I would probably do is if you did not want this left side, I'd crop it out. And you can do that, just a simple crop, by going back into the Edit Current Tool Set. Right here. You can go ahead and choose Crop and put that up there. Actually, Rotate was nice, and that's already up there, so I'm going to leave it alone. But sometimes, especially when you have these scans like this, you'll have some things that are turned sideways. And while it can still be read by an individual with a screen reader as long as the OCR has been run on it correctly, it's nice to be able to, you as a viewer, to be able to rotate it if you want to. So it's just one extra step you can save from having to go somewhere else to do it. All right. So does that answer your question, sir? All right.
So could you crop it out? Can you show me?
Absolutely. So we are going to go ahead and just select the crop button here. Go up in the top left, grab it, and let's go ahead and say we want to take out all of that black line. Oops. Wrong side.
It's going to take all of those up there.
No, it gives you the option. I'll show you in just a second. So once we select the side that we want to keep, double click on it. Down here you can do all pages or from page 3 to 3. You can do even an odd pages, because I know that when I used to scan books in, when they would pull it in, if the page would always be a little askew. So one page will be set like this, and then the opposite of that page would be set the other way. So I would go in and crop things to where everything looked right, but you couldn't crop them all the same way, because if you did, they wouldn't come out right. So you'd have to do even pages because they were all set like this, then odd pages that were all set like that. And if you didn't do that, then half the content was gone, and that caused a lot of problems. So, yes, sir.
Can I interject?
Absolutely.
Method?
Go ahead.
I use as an adjunct to Acrobat a program called Paperboard from Nuance, same people who publish
Yes, sir.
Dragon. And it has a really nice editor. You could simply erase everything on the left-hand side and the big heavy black line, and you wouldn't be changing the page dimensions to the majority reader. Different size pages or oriented pages. And so stuff does eventually wind up in Acrobat. Lots of times it goes to PowerPoint, not PowerPoint, through paperport first. And that's bundled with a lot of scanners. In fact, it's bundled with some word processor, word processing.
Okay. I like that, actually. I like the fact that you can erase things and not have to just delete that
You
content.
can decycle, you can deskew, you can straighten up lines.
Nice.
It does a lot of nice little things which are hard or really, really cumbersome to do in Acrobat.
Now, I will say that Acrobat will deskew to a certain extent. What it does is if the text is a little tilted, it will tilt the page back right to where it reads correctly. Go ahead.
I'm going to warn a little bit about doing 2 pages at once, because when you try to deskew, it doesn't know which page
Yes,
it should deskew.
that's true. All right. So for the example, I'm going to show you how to go ahead and crop. All right. So stay with me.
Can
All right,
I
so
put a black box over it or something? Would
Well,
that not-
basically what this does is if you look at the top left of where this cursor is, you see the cursor? We're going to go up here and we're going to select this page. Okay? When we do, we're going to double click on it, and now that's gone. Now because that other text had already been tagged, we're going to have to delete that out. So I go back and select the hand.
I could have also simply not tagged it and then you would read it.
Yes, so let's go back and we can select,
If there is no number 2 there with that text, you won't read it.
you can grab multiple things just by holding down Control. So if you had a bunch of figures on a page that you wanted to get rid of, or there was a lot of imperfections that you wanted to go ahead and grab, and I've seen pages from scans like this, well, there will be 15 to 20 different things on the page that either somebody highlighted something or was writing in the margins or doing whatever. Holding Control and selecting the different things works just like anything else. It will go ahead and select it. So we can go ahead and delete those from there, and now the screen reader will not see those.
I hate to be legalistic
Go ahead.
about this, but because we don't know exactly how legalistic they're going to be in
Go ahead.
relationship to this. So for it to be truly accessible, when you do that and you don't tag it and the screen reader doesn't read it, but that doesn't make it accessible anymore to everyone. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that's why I was saying, can I just put a black box over it, because then it's accessible. We're back on an even playing field. I know that, and I don't know how, like I said, how legalistic they're going to be with this, when all this has to be implemented. But if they are, then I'm trying to think of
In
ways
this
that I
particular case, because you are only trying to convey Chapter 5, that you do not want this content over here, I don't think they could say anything to you. And the
It's
reason,
on chapter 5.
exactly. If you're not going to use that and you're not going to crop out that over here, then you have nothing to worry about, because what your assignment was is Chapter 5, and that's going to be accessible.
Right, I mean, I understand that, but
The lawyer's going to understand.
yes.
Well, from a logical standpoint,
And that's it.
from a logical standpoint, what I just said is going to be the case. Bill, would you agree? All right.
Yeah,
If the content that was not assigned by you is not accessible, then that's not on you. The content that you assign and that you have gone through and made accessible, that is what needs to be accessible.
That's fine. I mean, I want that to be the case, but I know that in some cases you will have that random person who will say, well, that's not completely accessible, and that's what it's supposed to be. I know exactly what you're saying. And I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to think about,
Devil's
as an
advocate. No,
instructor,
I completely understand.
any instructor who would say, well, now this person says it's not accessible, and then it becomes this whole other issue. And you're right. If I say it's Chapter 5, that's Chapter 4. You weren't even supposed to be over there. So yeah, I'm just thinking about that, because we don't know what the requirements are going to be. Those are not really clear yet.
I would say, and because I haven't dealt with exactly that situation, but I have dealt with teachers that have had things like this in the past at Ole Miss anyways. And basically what it was is that they would say ignore this side, and actually some of the teachers would actually draw an X through it.
Okay.
So no matter what I do at that point, unless I go back in and physically write word for word that paragraph, not going to happen. Although I do like the fact that he was saying that paperport will actually allow you to erase it.
Right, and I think that's what, because we all assign different things, and it might be chapter 5, but we don't want you to read chapter 27 in chapter 5. So what do you do with page 27? And how can you get rid of that or get rid of a portion of that? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, you can crop it out. Worst case, I mean, you can crop it out. But being that this still had those two things up here labeled, you'll have to actually take that label off first. Now you can go back in afterwards, for example, and this will take a second. So heading 1, say text. All right, and then we're going to crop it. So we're going to grab, double click, okay. Now this over here is still tagged. So what we're going to have to do is go back to the touch-up reading order, select that, and delete. And then that number 1 right here, because you can't see it, but you can still see it over here on the left side. So you know it's still there. So what we're going to do is select that, right-click, and delete selected item structure. And now that's gone. Now the only thing that you have is this page. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. But he is correct in the sense that if you were to change this, but the rest of the pages looked like this, I mean, it's possibly an irritation to somebody, but I mean, if you don't want that content out there, then don't put it out there.
Sites can avoid straying eyes if you, say, scan an article out of a magazine. You want to look at one particular little sidebar, and just erase everything else. That's all there is in the document. And then that also gives the publisher's lawyers less to grab.
Sure. All right. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, we're all kind of in that same vein, trying to figure out what you need to do and how much you need to really edit yourself as you're making your own decisions about what you're presenting.
Right.
You don't put a smiley face anymore, because what does that really mean? And does it mean anything anymore? So those sorts of, I'm just trying to figure out how to work through that process.
I was told when I did this before that make accessible what the teacher wants it to make accessible. And how it was at Ole Miss is I would have teachers occasionally bring me material to make accessible for their classrooms. It's not the same here. And normally I would try to teach them rather than them bring me everything, because that started to mount up really quickly. But I would just simply make the stuff that they wanted accessible. I would go in and deselect the material that they didn't want the students to access. And sometimes, like I said, they draw an X through it. Other times they wouldn't, and I just wouldn't include it. But I never had anything come back on me for it. And I explained to our director exactly what I was doing. And actually, when I brought it to her, she said, I think that you're going too far with it. Like, I think you're actually overthinking it. And I do understand from a legal standpoint that that's the way it should be. And the truth is I think that before I would definitively say, this is what you should do, I would talk to Lance.
Well, and you're also thinking of two different things, because you're talking about students who require ADA accommodations, which is a whole other thing. This is accessibility no matter what.
Yes.
So it's not for, so that's the sort of, that makes it a little bit more ambiguous and, well, and graze those lines, because it does make it, it's much more prescribed when it's an ADA accommodation. Yes. And this is kind of beyond that. I mean, it has to be accessible.
Yes.
Whatever that means.
When it comes to content, there's no specific accommodation that says you have to have all your PDFs like this, or you have to have your Word documents like this. It's accessibility just on the entire level. An accommodation would be having access to a computer for tests, extended time on tests, different locations, that kind of thing. When it comes to accessibility, and it is for everyone kind of thing. And the truth is that I personally think that all textbooks should be PDFs, because for a lot of reasons. Number one, and I know that a lot of people love to have that book in their hand, but being able to search the entire textbook, Control F, find anything in the document. Portability. It saves so much time. You can actually hyperlink the table of contents where you can actually go to things in the book. It's so much faster. If I had that option in college, I would have taken it for sure. But then you can also have things read to you. And when things are read to you, while you're reading along, it helps with reading retention because you have different things coming in, different information, the same information, but in different ways. It helps with reading
Yeah,
retention.
I mean, as an instructor, you're now saying, I'm going to need a new book because it does all of that for me. I don't have to deal with these sorts of things. And that's what I'm sort of thinking about. What sorts of things that are already out there that I can just, it's already done.
Right, already done for you. Yes. Well, I think my last word on that is that if you get to a point where you're confused or you're worried that I don't know if I should do this or not, call, I don't know if you should call Lance Alexis directly, but I think that maybe calling the department and just asking, this is where I'm at, I'm curious, is this wrong or is this right, should I do it or can I do it kind of thing, and they'll answer your questions.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
No. All right, real quick, let's go over one last thing for you. When it comes to disability, the first line when it comes to anybody being able to understand you is going to be language. If I'm speaking Japanese and you don't speak Japanese, or I'm speaking German and you don't understand German, then obviously that's going to be a breakdown. You're not going to be able to access what I'm telling you. So we are going to actually change the language that is set in here by going up to File, Properties, Advanced, Language. There are many languages to choose from. What this does, for example, say this was a Spanish book or a language book. If you were to go in and have an English screen reader try to read this to you, or Spanish or German or something, it would make no sense. It would have no inflection on the voice. You wouldn't understand it. Whereas if you were to set this to Spanish and they were going in and reading Spanish words, it would make a lot more sense. So just one thing to think about. Now, there are a few other things that we can go over as far as accessibility is concerned, but here's the main things I want you to take away from this. Making sure that the optical character recognition software has been run, that the text is renderable, and that the photos and the pictures all have alt tags to them. That's it. It doesn't, I know we've discussed a lot of different things with a reading order and going through, and that's all great. But the truth is I know how much work you guys have. And the biggest thing for you as far as to take away from any of this, anything that you want to do with accessibility, just make sure that the pictures are tagged and that the OCR has been run. Those are the main things. And that's going to make things accessible. It may not be perfect, but it will be able to be accessed. Any questions?
You were too good?
Apparently.
Well, I mean, the things that run through mine are like, other, I guess, information delivery media besides these three things. I gotta think like, okay, so I use Prezi a lot, but I can go on my own, I can Google, see if anyone's done anything with accessibility in Prezi. Because it's
not very accessible.
No, it's not. No, that's why I like the media impression, like, well, because it's all an image, it's not,
Exactly. When it comes to, it's almost like artistic license.
Yeah, exactly.
To be able to keep you interested as a teacher and wanting, and being creative and trying to bring all these new things in. My wife will sit for hours and try to come up with games for accounting. She does it. The students seem to like it. But I mean, if you couldn't do that, then I'm sure it would be stifling. There are ways around those things. Just by building small little accessibility things in there, just keep in mind that pictures aren't accessible. A description is great. If you are doing a presentation in Prezi and you like that presentation, then keep it. But just add a transcript, something that they can have, something that they can use a screen reader and just go in behind and say, okay, well, this is what it's doing. They can still hear it. And if they can't hear it, then they can read that transcript.
I have a question. So I'm one of the mentors for the online course development. So we are now telling faculty we mentor to turn all their content into PDFs.
Okay.
Then we just go in and make sure those PDFs are accessible.
Okay.
Is that still good advice? So we're asking that they not do Word documents because there's no guarantee the student's going to be able to download them. And I don't know when and how we switched from HTML.
That's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
Then we
So-
were revising HTML, now we're not really sure what we should sell.
They still say that HTML is the best medium because you can build so much into it. That being said, PDFs are great. You can build an enormous amount of accessibility into it. But people just need to understand, at least when it comes to D2L, you have to be able to download it. And because you've uploaded it for the students to view, they can download it. So if someone has an issue, and you can say that at the beginning of the semester, if you have an issue, or if you're using any kind of adaptive technology, make sure that you download the documents first, whether it be Word document, or the PowerPoint presentations, or the PDFs. Just make sure they download it beforehand. Because at that point, it's going to be accessible with the accessibility that you have built in. I don't understand, and actually Bill and I were having a conversation beforehand, why the viewers are not accessible. It's not just D2L. Any viewer is not accessible, and it doesn't make sense to me that why they would do it like that.
So in other words, if we just make it one of our policies, right, then we add a line in our syllabus, right, for the online classes that specifically addresses this issue of downloading all the material, would that take care of it? 'Cause we're
Repeat that
trying
one more
to
time
come
for
up
me.
with something that will apply to everybody whose
Right.
courses we're reviewing. So should we make it an expectation that every faculty member who's developing an online class on that syllabus template that we create for them and we ask them to use, that there be a line that specifically addresses this request?
I think it would be a good idea.
Provides
I think
suggestions
that
they download.
I think it would be a good idea. Most people will already know if they are in that situation. If they don't, I think it would be informative and it will save you some time.
Well, it's certainly,
A lot of students don't.
and it
No, I believe you.
recognize that we
Completely.
certainly care not to have thought about it. But now as reviewers of other people's courses, I would then have to go in and make sure all of these have alt text and stuff. I mean, I don't have a reader to check that they're readable. I don't have a way of checking that they're accessible.
In my opinion, that should fall on the teacher. If you're going to go in and review other people's things, they can do the same thing you can. You just have to tell them what to do, what to look for. And keep in mind, now this is a workshop. Great. You know, I'll come and do this. But if you have a question about this, ask. Call me. If you or your department want somebody to come by and explain things, call and ask. We can
It's
either.
really all new, honestly, to all of us. I'm on the University Disability
Okay.
Committee, and we just discussed this last week. Okay, now we have to do this. And so I said, well, what's our first step?
Workshop.
Well,
No,
for the
no,
on-
it was
for the
hit
online
the online
class,
course.
the online
Mm.
course,
Hit
we've
the
been doing
online
it for a couple of years already. We've been discussing this, we've been working on accessibility for 2 years already. So we already have been asking for alt tag images and such things for 2 years.
And I have a section that I'm trying to propose to add to our peer review form. But I'm not sure faculty can be expected to complete all of this. I mean, that's what we have to determine.
I think
what
it may be a
they
good idea for
expected to
maybe
complete.
some kind of training for them.
Right.
That it's not really, and it's not, I'm not trying to sound too gruff with it, but like a mandatory, like, you need to do this
Right.
kind of thing. It's not really a question or, please, it's not like that anymore.
Well, new course developers are asked to go to training at the FITC.
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, but we have so many people out there who have been like us, who have been developing for a long time, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything that I can do-
Right, right.
If there's anything that I can do as far as giving a workshop to a certain group of people or individual work, feel free to ask. I don't mind telling people and explaining this, or if you want a copy, more copies of the handouts or whatever you want, I'll be more than happy to help. The only thing that I ask is people don't say, here's all my stuff, make it accessible.
Why not?
Well, and he has a workshop, he has a workshop in 2 weeks here on universal design, so you might want to. Yeah,
Yes.
there's another workshop.
Yes, sir.
What are the expectations for if you load videos into Goodwill?
Honestly, everything should be captioned. That's the expectation, is everything should be captioned. Is that going to happen? No. But people, if you were to come over to us today, over the FITC, and say, you know, I want to put this on here, we're going to tell you that you need to put captions on it. But when you leave here, we're not going to chase you down the street trying to make sure that you do it. The truth is that YouTube does have an auto caption feature. It's 70% at best correct. And my advice is if you do use it, to go back and check. Because you might get some things said in there that you did not say that will not translate well. Absolutely, sir. You have a good day.
Loading a TED Talk or documentary or anything like that?
That should have. Now, if that's off YouTube, the TED Talks I know already should have captions. And if you can access it, as long as there is that CC button in the bottom right-hand corner, you're good. But when you have things that you built yourself that you're trying to do, having a transcript, or you can feed it into YouTube and see how close it gets and augment anything that you want to augment. But the problem comes in, it's not really the content that you create. It's the content that you want to pull down from other people that has already been created that you don't have artistic light. You can't go out and say, I'm going to take this and then I'm going to put captions on top of it. You just can't do that. Well, I think realistically you could, but it's not really on the legal side of things. But that's kind of where we are. I know that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but true, very true. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Have a good day, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just gotta get my lady throat. I don't have that.
It's, you know, when I first started working accessibility, period, before I worked for St. Jude in our IT department, and